During my wife's sister's wedding reception, my wife's mother shouted, "Who invited you here? You can never be part of us." My wife asked me to apologize to her for coming, and I blatantly refused. Everything changed after that. Hey there, thanks so much for sticking with us. Your support keeps this channel alive, and we're truly grateful. If you're loving these tales, hit that subscribe button to join the ride. Oh, and drop a comment letting us know what city you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear it, and you might just get a shout out in our next story. Speaking of which, today's special shout out goes to Sean Derry in Birmingham, UK. Glad you're enjoying the journey. Alright, enough chat. Let's dive into today's story. The ballroom glittered like a chandelier caught in a storm of light. Crystal flutes clinking, silk dresses rustling, and laughter spilling over the edges of polite restraint. It was my wife's sister's wedding reception, a spectacle of excess that could have funded a small nation's dreams. White roses cascaded from every table, their scent cloying enough to choke a man who preferred the open air. I stood near the back, nursing a glass of bourbon I hadn't touched, watching the crowd swirl like moths around the flame of wealth. My wife, Elena, glowed in the center of it all, her auburn hair catching the light as she laughed with her sister, the bride. She belonged there, radiant and untouchable. I didn't, and that was fine by me, until it wasn't. The band struck up a waltz, and the guests parted like a tide, revealing my mother-in-law, Margaret, striding toward the microphone with the grace of a general storming a battlefield. Her silver gown shimmered, but her eyes were cold steel, scanning the room until they locked on me. I felt the weight of her gaze before she even opened her mouth, a predator sizing up prey it deemed unworthy. I straightened my tie. Simple, black, nothing like the gaudy peacock feathers the other men wore, and waited. I'd seen her venom before, but never like this. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice slicing through the music like a guillotine. The band faltered, then stopped. "We're here to celebrate my daughter's union, a day of joy and family." She paused, her lips curling into something that wasn't a smile. "But I have to ask, who invited you here?" Her fingers stabbed the air, pointing straight at me. A gasp rippled through the crowd, heads swiveling like puppets on strings. "You, skulking in the shadows like some beggar at the gate. You can never be part of us." The words landed like a slap, sharp and public, echoing off the gilded walls. My jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. The room buzzed, whispers, stifled laughs, the clink of glasses as people leaned in for the show. Elena's face drained of color, her eyes darting between me and her mother. Margaret stood triumphant, chin high, as if she'd just purged a stain from her pristine lineage. I could have laughed at the irony if it didn't burn so damn much. They thought I was nothing, a leech clinging to Elena's supposed fortune. They didn't know I could buy this venue, the catering, and every soul in it twice over, and still have change to burn. I set my glass down, the soft thud louder in my ears than the murmurs around me. "Margaret," I said, my voice low but steady, cutting through the noise. "You've made your point." I turned to leave, the crowd parting like I carried a plague. Elena rushed after me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "James, wait," she hissed, grabbing my arm just outside the ballroom doors. The air in the corridor was cooler, free of perfume and pretense, but her touch felt like a shackle. "You can't just walk out like that." She didn't mean it. She's just drunk, upset about the wedding costs, upset enough to humiliate me in front of 200 people. I pulled my arm free, meeting her wide, pleading eyes. Up close, she was still beautiful, her freckles faint under the flush of panic. She meant every word, Elena, and you know it. Her hands twisted together, a habit from our early days when she'd been nervous about meeting my quiet, unassuming self. Back then, I'd thought it endearing. Now it just looked weak. "Please," she said, voice trembling. "Go back in there." Apologize to her. For me. I stared at her, the woman I'd married 3 years ago under a sky too blue to promise storms. Apologize? For existing? For daring to stand beside her while her family sneered? The bourbon I hadn't drunk churned in my gut, a phantom heat. "No," I said, the word flat and final. "I don't grovel." Her mouth opened, then closed, fish-like and helpless. I didn't wait for more. I walked out into the night, the valet scrambling to fetch my car, a modest sedan I'd chosen over the Bentleys I could have driven. The engine purred to life, and I gripped the wheel, the leather cool against my palms. In the rearview mirror, the venue shrank, its lights blurring into a smear of gold. My phone buzzed, Elena, no doubt, but I let it ring. She'd chosen her side long before tonight, even if she didn't realize it. The drive home was a haze of city lights and rage, but beneath it, something colder took root. They thought I was nothing. Margaret, with her venomous tongue. Elena, with her spineless plea. Her sister, smirking through her veil, and the rest of that clan, dripping in borrowed arrogance. They'd built their world on assumptions, Elena's inheritance, her father's old money, never guessing I'd been the one quietly paying their bills, funding their excess through back channels they'd never traced. I'd stayed in the shadows because I liked it there, letting Elena shine while I worked unseen. My wealth wasn't a trophy, it was a tool. And now it'd be a weapon. I pulled into the driveway of our house, hers, technically, in their eyes, though I'd paid off the mortgage years ago. The lights were off, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left. Inside, I poured a real drink, the amber liquid catching the moonlight through the window. My sister's number glowed on my phone screen as I dialed. She picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp despite the hour. James? What's wrong? They crossed a line tonight, Sarah, I said, swirling the glass. Margaret, Elena, all of them. They think I'm dirt under their feet. A pause, then a low chuckle. Big mistake. What's the play? I leaned back, the plan forming like a storm cloud on the horizon. They'll beg me to come back tomorrow. I'll let them think they've won. Then I'll take it all apart, piece by piece. Sarah's laugh was sharp, approving. Good. I'll start moving things on my end. They won't know what hit them. I hung up, staring into the dark. Margaret's words replayed. You can never be part of us. She was right, but not for the reasons she thought. I wasn't one of them, and I never would be. But I'd make damn sure they felt the weight of what they'd lost. The bourbon burned going down, a promise sealed in fire. They'd rue the day they tried to bury me. The morning sun sliced through the blinds like a guillotine, cutting sharp lines across the hardwood floor of the living room. I hadn't slept. The bourbon glass sat empty on the coffee table, a silent witness to the hours I'd spent pacing, plotting, letting the rage harden into something useful. My phone buzzed incessantly, Elena's name flashing 6 times before I silenced it. She'd be here soon, I knew, dragging her family's crocodile tears behind her. They'd come begging, not because they were sorry, but because they'd smelled blood in the water and thought it was mine. They were wrong. The doorbell chimed, a polite little trill that didn't match the storm brewing behind it. I smoothed my shirt, plain, unstarched, the kind of thing they'd mocked me for, and opened the door. Elena stood there, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a hasty bun that betrayed her sleepless night too. Behind her loomed Margaret, her silver gown swapped for a crisp blazer, but the same imperious tilt to her chin. Flanking them were Elena's sister, Clara, the blushing bride, and her new husband, a wiry man named Trevor whose suit screamed inherited money he hadn't earned. A full delegation, then. Perfect. James, Elena started, her voice soft, rehearsed. Can we come in? We need to talk. I stepped aside, letting them file in like mourners at a funeral they didn't yet know was theirs. Margaret's heels clicked with purpose, her gaze sweeping the room as if she owned it. Clara clutched Trevor's arm, her wedding glow dimmed by the tension. I gestured to the sofa, but they stayed standing, a united front of unease. Good. Let them squirm. We owe you an apology, Elena said, her hands twisting together in that old nervous tick. Last night got out of hand. Mother was upset. The wine went in her head. Upset. I cut in, keeping my tone even, curious. She seemed pretty clear to me. You can never be part of us. Hard to mishear that over a microphone. Margaret's lips thinned, but she stepped forward, her voice dripping with forced warmth. It was a misunderstanding, James. Weddings are emotional. I didn't mean to single you out. Your family, after all. Family. The word landed like a brick, heavy with lies. I almost laughed, but instead I tilted my head, studying her. Family, I echoed. Funny way of showing it. Trevor cleared his throat, jumping in with the eagerness of a man who thought he could fix anything with a handshake. Look, mate, we all got off on the wrong foot. Clara and I want to start fresh, Maybe you could come to the brunch tomorrow? Smooth things over. I let the silence stretch, watching their faces tighten. Clara's eyes flicked to Elena, pleading for backup. Margaret's jaw twitched, a crack in her armor. They weren't here to mend fences, they were here to test me, to see if I'd bend. I'd give them what they wanted, just not the way they expected. All right, I said finally, letting my shoulders slump a fraction, my voice soften. I'll come to the brunch. No hard feelings. I even managed a small, tight smile, the kind a beaten dog might offer its master. Their relief was palpable. Elena's exhale, Margaret's smug nod, Trevor's quick grin. They thought they'd won me over, tamed the stray. Idiots. Elena crossed the room, touching my arm. Thank you, James. This means a lot. Her fingers lingered, a ghost of the intimacy we'd once had. I didn't pull away, let her think she still had a hold. As they left, Margaret lingered at the door, her eyes narrowing. You're a good man for this, she said, a faint edge to her tone. Not everyone would be so forgiving. A test, maybe, or a warning. I just nodded, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt like a lock snapping shut. The house fell silent again, but my mind was anything but. I pulled out my laptop, the screen's glow casting shadows across my face as I logged into accounts they'd never dreamed I owned. A memory flickered. 5 years ago, sitting in a cramped diner with Sarah, counting loose change to split a coffee while we sketched out our first real estate deal. We'd flipped a rundown warehouse into a gold mine, then another, then a dozen more. I'd kept it quiet, funneling profits through shell companies, letting Elena shine as the wealthy one, while I stayed the humble shadow. Her family's old money had dried up long ago. They just didn't know I'd been propping them up, paying off their debts through discreet favors. Until now. My phone rang. Sarah. I answered, leaning back in my chair. They just left, I said. Hook, line, and sinker. Her laugh was a razor's edge. They're predictable. What's next? They think I'm broken, I said, scrolling through a list of their financial ties. Clara's boutique, Trevor's failing startup, Margaret's charity that was more slush fund than goodwill. I'll play along. Go to their damn brunch. Meanwhile, you start pulling strings. The boutique's lease is up next month. Let it lapse. Trevor's investors? Spook them. Done, she said, her voice all business. And your assets? Start the transfers. Quietly. I want it all in your name by the time this blows up. She paused, then asked, Elena too? I hesitated, the memory of her touch still warm on my arm. 3 years ago, she'd laughed at my bad cooking, kissed me under a rain-soaked awning, promised me forever. But last night, she'd chosen them over me, even if she didn't see it that way. Yes, I said finally. Her too. Sarah didn't push. I'll handle it. Watch your back. They're not as dumb as they look. I hung up, staring at the ceiling. They weren't dumb, no. Margaret's parting shot had carried weight. She suspected something, even if she couldn't name it. Let her dig. She'd find nothing but the mask I'd worn for years. James the nobody, the quiet husband, the fool. The real me was a ghost in their world, and ghosts don't leave footprints. I poured another drink, the amber liquid catching the light like a promise. Tomorrow, I'd sit at their table, eat their food, smile at their jokes. I'd be the man they wanted, meek, beaten, theirs to pity. And while they preened, I'd be dismantling their lives, brick by brick, until the ground beneath them turned to ash. They'd invited me to their game, but I'd rewrite the rules. And they'd never see it coming. The house smelled of rain and regret, the kind of damp that seeps into your bones and lingers. It was late afternoon, the sky outside a bruised gray that mirrored the storm brewing inside these walls. I stood by the kitchen counter, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, its bitterness a faint echo of the words I was about to unleash. Elena bustled in from the garage, her arms full of grocery bags, organic kale, artisanal bread, the trappings of a life she thought we still shared. She hadn't spoken much since the brunch yesterday, where I'd played my part to perfection, the subdued husband, nodding at their jokes, swallowing their pity like a bitter pill. They'd lapped it up, oblivious to the noose tightening around them. James, can you grab the milk? She called, her voice bright but strained, like a string about to snap. I set the mug down and moved to help, my silence louder than her chatter. She unpacked with mechanical precision, avoiding my eyes. She knew something was off. Elle had known since I'd walked out of that wedding reception, but she convinced herself it could be smoothed over with time and groceries. She was wrong. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. We need to talk. Her hand stilled, a jar of honey hovering midair. She set it down slowly, turning to face me, her freckles stark against the pallor of her cheeks. About what? She asked, but the tremor in her voice said she already knew. About your family, I said, keeping my tone flat, a blade sheathed for now. About where you stand. She frowned, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. What do you mean? I told you, last night was a mistake. They apologized. You were there at brunch. Stop it, Elena. My voice cut through hers, sharp enough to make her flinch. They didn't apologize because they're sorry. They came because they think I'm weak, and you let them. You asked me to grovel to your mother after she spat on me in front of everyone. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted peace, James. For us. Peace. I stepped closer, the space between us shrinking to a chasm of unsaid truths. There's no peace when your mother calls me a beggar and you stand there begging me to kiss her ring. Where were you when she humiliated me? Where's your spine? She recoiled, her hands gripping the counter behind her. That's not fair. She's my mother. I can't just cut her off. They're my family. And I'm your husband. I shot back, the word heavy with 3 years of quiet sacrifices she'd never seen. Or was I just the shadow you let them step on? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. Not now. A memory flashed, our first date, her laughing as we shared a soggy sandwich under a leaking awning, rain streaking her face like tears. She'd been fearless then, untainted by her family's venom. I'd loved her for it. But that Elena was gone, buried under Margaret's shadow, and I was done mourning her. I'm not choosing between you, she said, voice breaking. I love you, James. You know that. Then prove it. I straightened, my gaze locking hers in a vice. Me or them? Right now. No more half measures, no more excuses. You pick a side, Elena, or I walk out that door and don't come back. Her breath hitched, a sob catching in her throat. The kitchen clock ticked, each second a hammer striking nails into a coffin. I watched her wrestle with it. Love, loyalty, fear, all warring behind those green eyes I'd once drowned in. She wiped her face with trembling hands, then whispered, You. I choose you. The words should have felt like a victory, but they didn't. They were hollow, laced with pragmatism instead of passion. She wasn't choosing me because she believed in us. She was choosing me because she thought I'd break otherwise, that I'd crumble without her. She didn't know I'd already started tearing our world apart, piece by silent piece. I nodded, letting a flicker of relief cross my face, just enough to sell it. Good, I said, softening my tone. We'll figure this out. Together. I stepped forward, pulling her into my arms, her head resting against my chest. She clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt, and I held her like nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, while she slept upstairs, I sat in the dark of my study, the glow of my laptop casting a cold light across the room. Sarah had texted earlier, first transfers done. Boutique lease is toast. Trevor's investors are jittery. I replied with a single word. More. My fingers flew across the keys, rerouting funds, shifting properties, burying my empire in layers of trusts and proxies only Sarah could unravel. Elena's name was nowhere near it, hers or her family's. They'd never touch a dime. Another memory crept in, Elena's father, drunk at a Christmas party 2 years ago, boasting about his legacy, while I quietly paid off his gambling debts to keep their mansion out of foreclosure. I'd done it for her, back when I thought love meant carrying their burdens. Now I saw it for what it was, a leash they'd slipped around my neck when I'd worn too long. The floor creaked behind me. I closed the laptop just as Elena appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the hall light. Can't sleep? She asked, her voice small. Work, I lied, turning to face her. Go back to bed. I'll be up soon. She hesitated, then nodded, shuffling away. I waited until her footsteps faded, then opened the laptop again. The screen glowed with a new email from Sarah. Next batch ready. Say the word. I typed back, do it. The coffee was cold now, but I drank it anyway, the bitterness grounding me. Elena had chosen me, but it was too late. She'd sealed her fate the moment she'd asked me to bow to Margaret. Tomorrow, I'd keep up the charade, breakfast together, smiles, promises of a fresh start. She believed it because she wanted to, because she couldn't imagine the man she'd married was a stranger now. And while she dreamed of reconciliation, I'd be stripping her world bare, brick by brick, until nothing remained but the echo of her choice. The air in the city buzzed with the hum of a machine starting to break, gears grinding, bolts loosening, a collapse no one saw coming but me. It was a week after Elena's choice, and I sat in a corner booth at a diner nobody in her family would ever step foot in. The coffee was burnt, the vinyl seats cracked, but it was mine, a relic of the days when Sarah and I had clawed our way up from nothing. My phone lay face up on the table, a steady stream of texts from Sarah lighting the screen. Boutique lease terminated. Landlords moving new tenants in next week. Trevor's lead investor pulled out, panic setting in. I sipped the coffee, its acrid bite a fitting match for the satisfaction curling in my chest. The pieces were falling, and I was the invisible hand knocking them down. Elena had been clingy since the ultimatum, hovering like a moth around a flame she didn't know was rigged to burn her. Breakfasts were a performance now, her chattering about reconciliation, me nodding over pancakes I didn't taste. She thought we were healing. I let her. It kept her blind while I worked. This morning, she'd kissed my cheek before heading to a yoga class, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed. By noon, the first cracks would show, and I'd be there to watch them widen. I drove to the bank next, a nondescript branch where I'd parked millions under layers of aliases. The teller, a young guy with a nervous tic, didn't blink when I handed over instructions to shift another chunk of assets to Sarah's holding company. Routine transfer, I said, and he nodded like it was nothing, though the numbers on the screen could have bought his life 10 times over. Outside, the wind whipped through the streets, carrying the faint scent of rain and ruin. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, Clara's boutique staff just got eviction notices. She's freaking out. Want me to push harder? I typed back, yes. Hit Trevor next. Full collapse. The unraveling began in earnest that afternoon. I was at home, pretending to read a book in the study, when Elena burst in, her face a mask of panic. James, something's wrong. Clara just called me in tears. The boutique's lease is gone. They're locking her out tomorrow. I looked up, furrowing my brow in feigned concern. Gone? How does that happen? I don't know. She paced, her yoga leggings still damp with sweat. She said the landlord wouldn't negotiate, just send a notice, and that was it. She's losing everything. Her inventory, her clients. And Trevor's a mess too. Some investor bailed on his startup. It's like everything's falling apart at once. I set the book down, leaning forward. That's rough. Did they say why? No, it's all vague. Business decisions, market shifts. Clara thinks someone's targeting them, but that's crazy, right? Her eyes searched mine, desperate for reassurance. I gave her a slow nod, my face a perfect mask of sympathy. Sounds like bad luck, I said. Maybe it'll blow over. She didn't buy it, not fully. Her fingers twisted together, that old tic flaring under stress. It's too much at once. Mom's freaking out. She's calling everyone she knows to figure this out. Let me know if I can help, I said, standing to pull her into a hug. She melted against me, her breath shaky. We'll get through it. The lie slid out smooth as silk, and she clung to it, blind to the puppet strings I'd already pulled. By evening, the chaos had spread. I drove to Margaret's sprawling estate, Elena's insistence, a family meeting to regroup. The mansion loomed against the darkening sky, its manicured lawns a stark contrast to the disarray inside. Clara sat on a velvet sofa, mascara streaking her face as she clutched a glass of wine. Trevor paced by the fireplace, his phone pressed to his ear, barking at someone who wasn't listening. Margaret reigned from an armchair, her blazer swapped for a silk robe, but her eyes were sharp, predatory. It's sabotage, Clara sobbed. Someone's doing this to us. Don't be dramatic, Margaret snapped, though her voice lacked its usual steel. Businesses fail. We'll recover. Recover. Trevor whirled on her, his face red. My startup's dead, 3 investors gone in a day. That's not a coincidence. I lingered by the doorway, hands in my pockets, the quiet observer they'd always dismissed. Elena sat beside Clara, murmuring comfort, while I cataloged their weaknesses. Clara's boutique was just the start. Sarah had already lined up creditors to call in Trevor's loans, and Margaret's charity was next, its donors about to get anonymous tips about mismanaged funds. They'd feel the squeeze, but they'd never trace it to me. Not yet. Margaret's gaze landed on me, narrowing. "James," she said, her tone clipped. "You're awfully quiet. Any thoughts?" I shrugged, keeping my voice mild. "Sounds like a rough patch. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." Her lips pursed, suspicion flickering in those cold eyes. "Yes. Well, we've weathered worse. Family sticks together." "Always," I agreed, meeting her stare with a faint smile. She didn't blink, and for a moment, I wondered if she sensed the trap closing. But then Trevor swore at his phone, and her attention snapped away. I slipped out to the porch, the night air cool against my skin, and checked my messages. "Sarah, charity donors spooked. 2 pulled funding tonight. They're crumbling." I typed back, "Keep going. No mercy." The door creaked behind me. Trevor stepped out, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. "Hell of a day," he muttered, exhaling smoke. "You believe this crap?" "Hard to," I said, leaning against the railing. "Almost feels personal." He froze, the cigarette halfway to his mouth. "You think so too?" I shrugged again, planting the seed. "Who'd want to hurt you all like this?" He stared at me, then shook his head. "No clue. But if I find out," he trailed off, flicking ash into the dark. I didn't push, just let the paranoia take root. Inside, Clara's sobs grew louder, Margaret's voice rising to drown them out. The machine was breaking, and I was the ghost turning the screws. Driving home, Elena was quiet, her hands knotted in her lap. "They're scared," she whispered. "I've never seen them like this." "They'll bounce back," I lied, my eyes on the road. "They always do." But they wouldn't. Not this time. Sarah and I had built an empire on patience and shadows, and now we'd use it to bury them. The unraveling had begun, and I'd watch it burn to the ground, piece by precious piece. The days bled into weeks, each one a thread in the tapestry of ruin I wove around Elena and her family. October had settled over the city like a shroud, crisp air, leaves crunching underfoot, the world shedding its skin while I shed mine. The house felt like a stage now, every room a set for the performance I'd perfected. James the husband, steady and forgiving, a prop in Elena's fragile hope. She clung to me harder as her family crumbled, her smiles brittle, her touch desperate. I played along, my mask seamless, while behind it, I dismantled everything she knew. Mornings were a ritual of lies. I'd wake early, brew coffee, and sit at the kitchen table with a newspaper I didn't read, letting her chatter fill the silence. Today was no different. She shuffled in, wrapped in a robe that hung loose on her thinning frame. Stress had carved hollows under her eyes, dulled her auburn hair. "Clara's moving in with Mom tomorrow," she said, pouring tea with hands that trembled slightly. "The boutique's gone. She's selling what's left online, but it's not enough." I folded the paper, setting it aside. "That's tough. She'll figure something out." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know, James. It's like the ground's falling out from under us. Trevor's barely speaking. He's holed up in some cheap rental, chasing investors who won't call back. Mom's charity gala got canceled. Donors keep dropping out. It's unnatural." I sipped my coffee, the bitterness a comfort. Bad luck comes in waves. They'll pull through. She stared at me, searching for something, reassurance, maybe, or a crack in my calm. "You really think so?" "Always have," I said, meeting her gaze with a steady warmth I didn't feel. She nodded, clinging to the lifeline, and I let her. She didn't see the text from Sarah lighting up my phone under the table. "Charity's toast, last donor bailed. Trevor's loans called in. Clock's ticking." I'd reply later, when her back was turned. The facade held through dinners, 2 quiet meals where she'd pick at her food, recounting the family's latest woes. I'd nod, offer platitudes, pour her wine. She'd started drinking more, her laughter edged with something raw. "You're my rock, James," she said one night, her hand squeezing mine across the table. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled, squeezed back, and said nothing. The irony was a blade in my gut, but I learned to live with its twist. Behind the scenes, I worked like a surgeon excising a tumor. Late nights in the study, the glow of my laptop a cold companion. I finalized the last transfers. Properties, Beach houses, city lofts, the vineyard Elena loved but never knew I'd bought, slipped into Sarah's name, buried in trusts no lawyer could untangle. Bank accounts drained into offshore havens, leaving just enough in our joint one to keep Elena from noticing. Sarah was a machine. Her updates relentless. Vineyards gone. Margaret's mortgage lenders sniffing around. Foreclosures next. I typed back, finish it. And she did. The cracks widened daily. Clara called one afternoon, her voice shrill through the speakerphone as Elena listened, pale. They took my car. Elena. Repossessed it right out of Mom's driveway. How am I supposed to live? Trevor's startup folded the next day, a headline in the local paper I left on the counter for Elena to find. Margaret's charity faced an audit, whispers of fraud circling like vultures. Elena cried herself to sleep most nights, her sobs muffled by the pillow, while I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, my heart a stone. I wasn't cruel, not outwardly. I'd hold her when she reached for me, murmur comfort she mistook for love. But inside, I was a ghost, detached, counting down. The final piece fell into place on a Thursday, the air thick with the promise of rain. Sarah called while Elena was out, her voice crisp. It's done. Everything's mine, legally, irreversibly. You're a pauper on paper. Good, I said, standing at the window, watching leaves spiral in the wind. Files ready, signed and sealed. Divorce papers are with the lawyer. Drop them whenever you're set. Tomorrow, she'd wake to the papers, the truth crashing down like a wave she couldn't outrun. She'd call, scream, beg. And I'd be gone, a shadow slipping through her fingers. The rain tapped the window, a steady rhythm to my thoughts. They'd lost everything, money, status, pride, and they still didn't know why. I'd kept the facade up long enough to watch them fracture, to feel the weight of their arrogance turn to ash. Tomorrow, the mask would fall, and they'd see the man they'd dismissed. But tonight, I sat in the dark, the storm outside a mirror to the one I'd unleashed, and waited for the end. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a sterile arena where lives were dissected under fluorescent lights. I sat at the petitioner's table, hands folded, my plain gray suit a deliberate contrast to the chaos about to erupt. Across the aisle, Elena hunched beside her lawyer, a wiry man with a cheap tie and a nervous tic. Her eyes were red, her auburn hair tangled, a far cry from the poised woman who'd once dazzled the wedding crowd. Behind her, Margaret loomed in the gallery, her silk scarf a defiant splash of color, while Clara and Trevor flanked her, their faces drawn with a mix of fury and fear. The air crackled with anticipation, a storm ready to break. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, tapped her gavel. Case number 4729, Dissolution of Marriage, James Carter versus Elena Carter. Counsel, proceed. Elena's lawyer stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, we're contesting the division of assets. Mr. Carter claims no property, but my client asserts joint ownership of significant holdings, real estate, investments, a vineyard, no property. The judge interrupted, peering over her glasses at me. Mr. Carter, you're alleging indigence in a marriage of 3 years? I rose, my voice calm, measured. That's correct, Your Honor. Everything I had is gone, transferred legally before these proceedings. I've got nothing to divide. A murmur rippled through the room. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes locking on mine, wide with disbelief. Her lawyer sputtered, that's preposterous. He's hiding assets, millions, we suspect. We demand discovery, bank records, the works. The judge raised an eyebrow, turning to my counsel, a sharp-eyed woman Sarah had hired, all business in her tailored suit. Miss Hargrove. She stood, sliding a stack of papers across the bench. All transfers were completed months ago, Your Honor. Legal, notarized, and filed with the appropriate authorities. My client owns nothing, no real estate, no accounts, not even a car in his name. Here's the documentation. The judge flipped through the pages, her frown deepening. Elena's lawyer lunged forward, voice rising. This is a sham. He's defrauded my client, moved everything to avoid a fair settlement. Prove it, I said, my tone low but cutting through the noise. All eyes swung to me, and I met Elena's stare head-on. Show me $1 I still control. You won't find it. Her lips trembled, then parted. James, what are you doing? Her voice cracked, a plea wrapped in rage. You can't just. Where did it all go? The gallery buzzed, Margaret leaning forward, her knuckles white on the railing. I didn't answer, not yet. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Carter, explain these transfers. Who holds the assets now? Before I could speak, the courtroom doors swung open, a sharp creak slicing the tension. Sarah strode in, her heels clicking with purpose, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She wore a black blazer that screamed power, her presence a thunderclap in the sterile room. I do, she said, her voice clear, unwavering. Sarah Carter, Mr. Carter's sister. The assets are mine, legally transferred over the past 6 months. I'm prepared to testify. Elena's lawyer gaped, papers slipping from his hands. Sister? This is collusion conspiracy. Prove it, Sarah shot back, her smile ablaze. She handed a folder to my lawyer, who passed it to the judge. Every transfer's documented. Dates, signatures, witnesses. James wanted out, and I took over. It's all above board. The judge scanned the documents, her expression unreadable. Elena stood, shaking, her voice rising to a shriek. You gave it all to her? Everything we built? The house, the vineyard, my life? I turned to her, my face a mask of calm. We didn't build anything, Elena. I did, and I took it back. Her hands flew to her mouth, a sob choking out. Margaret surged to her feet, her scarf slipping as she pointed at me. You snake. You've been playing us all along, ruining us while you hid behind this lie. The judge's gavel cracked again. Sit down, ma'am, or you'll be removed. Margaret sank back, her glare venomous, but I held her stare, unflinching. Explain yourself, Mr. Carter, the judge said, her tone sharp. This smells like a dodge. It's no dodge, I said, stepping forward. I built my wealth before and during the marriage, quietly, without her name on anything. When it became clear she valued her family's approval over me, I protected what was mine. I transferred it to my sister, who's been my partner in every venture. It's legal. Check the dates. Most of it was gone before I filed. A memory flashed, Sarah and me in a dingy office, signing our first deal, her grin fierce as we shook hands over a future they'd never touch. Elena's lawyer scrambled, flipping through papers, but the fight was draining from him. The judge leaned back, rubbing her temples. This is unusual, but if the transfers predate the filing and comply with state law, I can't undo them. Mrs. Carter, your claim hinges on proving fraud. Do you have evidence? Elena's lawyer hesitated, then slumped. Not yet, Your Honor. We'd need time. You've had months, I said, cutting him off. You won't find anything. It's over. The judge sighed, scribbling notes. I'll review the documents, but absent clear fraud, I'm inclined to grant the dissolution with no asset division. Mrs. Carter keeps what's in her name. Mr. Carter, apparently, has nothing. Hearing adjourned. The gavel fell, a final thunderclap. Elena collapsed into her chair, sobbing, while Margaret stormed forward, only to be blocked by a bailiff. Clara and Trevor sat stunned, their worlds ash. Sarah crossed to me, her hand brushing my shoulder. Well done, she whispered, then louder, for them to hear, you can never be part of us. The echo of Margaret's wedding barb hung in the air, a dagger turned back on them. Elena's eyes met mine one last time, hollow, betrayed. Why? She whispered. You chose them first, I said, soft but final, and turned away. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky a slate of possibility. Sarah fell into step beside me, her grin wicked. They're done. Foreclosure's hitting Margaret next week, Clara and Trevor are broke. You pulled it off. I nodded, the weight of victory settling in my chest, sharp-edged and cold. The courtroom faded behind us, their cries swallowed by the wind. I'd won, stripped them bare, but as we walked to the car, Elena's broken, why, lingered, a ghost I couldn't quite shake. The cafe sat tucked on a cliffside road, a weathered shack overlooking a sea that churned gray and restless under a November sky. I'd driven 2 hours from the city to find it, drawn by the promise of solitude and the tang of salt air, a balm for a victory that felt heavier than I'd expected. The wooden chair creaked under me as I sat by the window, a steaming mug of black coffee cradled in my hands. The place was near empty, just a grizzled fisherman nursing a beer at the counter and a waitress humming off-key to a crackling radio. It was perfect, a nowhere spot where the world couldn't follow. The courtroom was 3 days behind me, its echoes fading like a storm passing out to sea. Sarah had called that morning, her voice bright with the glee of a hunter savoring the kill. Margaret's house went to auction today, sold for peanuts. Clara's hawking jewelry on some sketchy website, and Trevor's vanished, probably drowning in debt somewhere. You did it, James. They're ghosts now. I'd grunted in acknowledgement, hung up, and hit the road. She'd revel in the wreckage. I needed distance to feel it settle. The coffee burned my tongue, sharp and grounding. Outside, waves crashed against jagged rocks, spraying mist that blurred the horizon. I'd won, stripped them bare, turned their arrogance to ash. Margaret's venom, Elena's betrayal, Clara's entitlement, Trevor's bluster, all reduced to nothing. I'd walked away clean, my empire safe in Sarah's hands, my name a blank slate. It should have felt like freedom, and in a way it did, a cold, vast kind, like the ocean stretching before me. But there was an ache, too, a splinter I couldn't dig out. Elena's why haunted me, a whisper threading through the wind's howl. I saw her face in the courtroom shattered, hollow, the woman I'd once loved reduced to a stranger's ruin. A memory crept in, unbidden, our second anniversary, a quiet night in a cabin I'd bought as a surprise. She danced barefoot to some old jazz record, her laughter warm as the firelight, her hands pulling me into a clumsy sway. I'd promised her forever that night, and meant it. Where had that Elena gone? Buried under Margaret's shadow, maybe, or lost the moment she'd asked me to bow at that wedding. I'd never know. And that was the splinter's edge, sharp, buried deep. The fisherman coughed, breaking my reverie. I glanced at him, leather skin, eyes like the sea, a man who'd weathered storms I'd never fathom. Did he carry ghosts too? I turned back to the window, tracing the coastline's curve. Sarah had asked me once, years ago, why I stayed quiet about our wealth. I don't need the spotlight, I'd said, and she'd nodded, understanding. It was power to me, control, not display. I'd let Elena shine because it suited her, suited us, until it didn't. Now the spotlight was theirs to lose, and they'd lost it all. My phone buzzed on the table, Sarah again. I flipped it over, unread. She'd want to plan the next move, expand the empire, turn our victory into a dynasty. She thrived on the game. I played it to win, then walk away. The transfers were done, my tracks erased. I was a ghost now too, in a way, free, untethered, a shadow slipping through the cracks of their world. The motel I'd crashed in after filing was a memory. I'd find a new place soon, somewhere small, untraceable. No mansions, no flash, just me and the quiet I'd always craved. The waitress shuffled over, refilling my mug with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rough day? She asked, her voice gravelly from years of smoke or shouting. Rough year, I said, and she chuckled, leaving me to my solitude. The coffee steamed anew, its heat a small comfort. I thought of Margaret's last glare in the courtroom, venom turned impotent. Clara's sobs, Trevor's collapse, puppets cut from strings I'd held. And Elena, broken by a choice she hadn't seen coming. I'd taken everything. Not out of greed, but justice, a reckoning for the night they'd tried to bury me. They'd never know the full scope, never trace the boutique's fall, the charity's ruin, the loans called in. That was the beauty of it, a perfect, invisible strike. But had I gone too far? The question gnawed, uninvited. Clara's kid, a nephew I'd met once, all sticky fingers and shy grins, would grow up in the fallout. Did he deserve the rubble I'd left? I pushed the thought down, sipping the coffee. They'd made their bed, all of them, when they'd sneered at me from that gilded stage. I just pulled the sheets tight. The radio crackled, a new snippet cutting through. Local heiress Margaret Langston loses estate in shocking foreclosure. I smirked, faint and fleeting. The world would move on, their names fading to whispers, then silence. Mine would too, by design. Sarah would carry the torch. I trusted her to wield it well. Me? I'd vanish, a shadow's edge against the light. The sea roared, relentless, and I leaned back, letting it fill the silence. Victory was mine, cold and complete, but that splinter remained, Elena's laugh, her touch, a life I'd burned to the ground. Was it worth it? The waves didn't answer, and neither did I. I finished the coffee, left a crumpled 20 on the table, and stepped into the wind. The cafe door swung shut behind me, the sound swallowed by the storm, and I walked into the gray, a ghost at peace with the shadows I'd cast. Well, that's the end of the story, but what do you think? Did James play the perfect game of revenge, or did he lose something in the shadows he can't get back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every one. If this tale of betrayal and triumph hooked you, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss my next audio story. See you in the next story.